I come home and get that.
Call meeting to order. I'd like to skip 2 through 5 to Wednesday and move to number 6. Do we have anything for public comment for agenda items? Nothing. Moving to athletics, Mr. Renzi.
Mr. Manzella, request approval to hire a varsity assistant swimming and diving coach. If there's no questions or objections, I'd like to have that placed on the agenda, please.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to award bids for spring sports supplies and equipment to the lowest responsible bidder meeting specifications. No questions or objections, I'd like to have it placed on the agenda, please.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the 2023-2024 fall supplemental athletic contracts pending solicitor review as attached. No questions or objections, I'd like to have it placed on the agenda, please.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following volunteers: varsity and middle school wrestling coach, middle school wrestling coach, and girls wrestling coaches. No questions or objections, I'd like to have it placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And we had an athletic committee meeting on January 3rd, 2023. Anything, Mr. Martucci? Mrs. Sampson?
Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
That's all, thank you.
That's all I have. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renzi. Moving to buildings and grounds, Mr. Layton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Request approval for Plum Contracting Incorporated, Pittsburgh, PA, to utilize the Falcon Stadium property for staging purposes for equipment and material in exchange for donation of materials to the Columbusville Area School District. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request conditional approval contingent upon successful submission of screening and background checks. Approval of the following additions to the custodial list for the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to appoint a maintenance personnel effective January 26, 2023. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And 8D would be to approve the addition and expansion project for additional athletic space, e.g. wrestling room, to adopt the preliminary plans submitted by the Wrestling Parents Association related thereto, and to authorize the completion of such project upon a full and complete observance, adherence, and satisfaction of the following conditions as presented and agreed upon. With no questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing no questions or objections, that will be placed on the agenda.
And 8E is facilities utilization in accordance with policy 707. With no questions or objections like 1 through 13 spread on those two.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Mr. Kokenar, do you have anything to add? Mr. Martucci?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kirsch? That's all we have, Mr. Manzella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Moving to Carnegie Free Library, Mr. Mongeau.
We have nothing on the agenda for this month, Mr. Panzal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montiel. Moving to Connellsville Area and Career and Technical Center, Mr. Kokenauer.
Thank you, Mr. Panzo. 10A grant, request approval to accept the Community Foundation Fayette County grant in the amount of $5,333. No questions or objections. I'd like to have placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And B, request approval to purchase the Asclepius TPK 84-3D dissection table through the CTC ARP ESSR grant for $61,480 plus shipping and handling from account number 13-1380-752-998-39-85-00. No questions or objections. I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have, Mr. Panzo. Mr. Layton. Mrs. Sangston.
Thank you.
Mr. Shannon. That's all we have, Mr. Panzo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kokenauer. Moving to curriculum, Mr. Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. Item 11A, comprehensive planning. Request approval of the 2023-2026 comprehensive plan, professional development plan, Act 48, and induction plan, Chapter 49. No questions or objections? I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Item 11B, CAMS course selection. Request approval for the Connellsville area middle school course descriptions for the 2023-2024 school year. No questions or objections? I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Item 11C, ELA series. Request approval to solicit bids for a K-5 ELA series. No questions or objections? I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Item 11D, travel. In accordance with policy number 431, request approval of the following professional employee travel. Amy Witt, senior high teacher, to attend the STEM Cyber Program, University of Pittsburgh, February 8th and 9th, 2023, at an approximate cost of $430 for 2 substitutes and travel to be paid from 10-110-580-0-39-80-00. Aaron Ostosky, senior high teacher, to attend virtually the AP Pre-Calculus APSI workshop, June 20th through June 23rd, 2023, at a cost of $650 for registration, to be paid for from Title II funds. No questions or objections? I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Item E, curriculum meeting. Curriculum meeting was held January 13th, 2023 at 10:30 a.m. That's all I have. Mr. Renzi? Mr. Mongeau? Dr. Coons?
I have nothing, thank you.
That's all we have, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harshman. Moving to cyber, Mr. Martray.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. I have nothing this evening. Mr. Kokenauer, anything to add?
Thank you.
Mr. Mongeau? Mr. Ghost? That's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Martray. Moving to federal programs, Mr. Mongeau.
So we have one item for Wednesday's meeting. Request the approval for Tracy Coons and Joyce Cavallo to attend the 55th Annual Pennsylvania Association of Federal Programs Conference at Kalahari Resort, Pocono Manor, Pennsylvania, April 16th through April 19th, 2023, and the approximate cost of $2,700 to be paid from federal programs. And without objection, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Mr. Martucci, do you have anything?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Martray? Dr. Coon?
I have nothing, thank you.
That's all we have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mongeau. Moving to finance, Mr. Renzi.
Thank you, Mr. Manzella. 14A, request approval of the following donations as presented. No questions or objections, I'd like to have it placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the accelerated budget opt-out resolution certifying tax rate within inflation index for the 2023-2024 school year as proposed. No questions or objections, I'd like to have it placed on the agenda, please.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And request approval of the attached requisitions orders and to authorize district business office to process purchase orders and payments. No questions or objections, I'd like to have it placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Anything you want to add, Mr. Lake?
Thank you.
Mr. Harrison?
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Robinson?
Nothing,
That's all I have, Mr. Manzella.
Thank you, Mr. Renzi. Moving to food service, Mrs. Sangston.
Thank you. Request a conditional approval contingent upon successful submission of screening and background checks approval of the following additions to the substitute cafeteria list for the 22-23 school year. The questions or objections, I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have. Mr. Kokenar? Mr. Martray? Mr. Triffinoff? Did I pronounce that right? All right, that's all we have. Thank you.
For the opportunity and to be here, and again for the warm welcome everybody has given me, and looking forward to working with everybody. Thanks for joining me for the team.
Thank you. We're glad you're here, and we're excited to work with you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Sangston. Moving to personnel and review and liaison, Mr. Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. 16A is substitute professional additions, requesting a conditional approval contingent upon successful submission of screening and background checks approval of the following additions to the professional substitute list for the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, will be placed on the agenda.
16B is request a conditional approval contingent upon successful submission and screening and background checks of the following addition to the support personnel substitute list, for the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for the teacher to take an unpaid leave of absence for the second semester of the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And the following sabbatical leave is confirmed by the board. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
The following family and medical leave act leaves are confirmed by the board. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for support personnel to take up to 10 intermittent unpaid days as requested for the remainder of the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the retirement of the custodian effective January the 20th, 2023. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the resignation of the support personnel effective December 12th, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And request approval to accept the resignation of the support personnel effective December 30th, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the resignation of the cafeteria worker contingent upon being hired as a 4-hour custodian. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a 4-hour custodian effective February the 6th, 2023. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a long-term substitute teacher for special education for the 2022-2023 school year effective December the 19th, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a long-term substitute teacher for special education for the remainder of the 2022-2023 school year effective January the 9th, 2023, and I so move. I'm sorry. No question or objection, I get placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a long-term substitute teacher for Title I for the remainder of the 22-23 school year effective January the 4th, 2023. No questions or objections, I get placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the resignation of a nurse with the final date of employment to be March the 13th, 2023, per Act 14 of the PA Code, or unless released prior to the March 13th, pending appropriate replacement and transition and replacement is approved by the superintendent. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for an ESP region office at large for release time. Cost to be reimbursed by the PSEA as follows. March the 10th, 2023, half day. March the 26th, 2023, half day. And April the 27th and 28th, 2023, 2 days. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a long-term substitute teacher for 4th grade at Dunbar Township, effective November the 4th, 2022, for the remainder of the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a personal student aide effective January the 25th, 2023. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to hire as a personal student aide effective January 25th, 2023. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And request approval as a volunteer for the JROTC program for January and February 2023. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Mr. Renzi, do you have anything to add?
I have nothing to add, thank you, Mr.
Mr. Harshman?
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Coconut? Dr. Bradley?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all we have, Mr. Manzello. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Did a fine job. Policy and legislative, Mr. Martre.
Thank you, Mr. Panzello. We have nothing this evening. Mr. Mongelli, anything else to add? Mr. Harshman?
Nothing, thank you.
Dr. Bradley?
Nothing, thank you.
And that's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Martre. Moving to safety and security, Mr. Martucci.
Thank you, Mr. Panzello. We have no agenda items at this time. Mr. Renzi, anything to add? Mr. Kopenauer? Mr. Cormack? That's all, Mr. Panzello. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martucci. Sticking with you for special education, please.
Thanks again. Request approval for extended school year on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, June 26th through July 27th, 2023. Prep day for teachers and special education and support professionals on June 27th, 2023, 7:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. as follows. Students, 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Teachers, 7:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Special education support professionals, 7:45 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. There are no questions or objections. I'd like that placed on Wednesday's agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request for the Collinsville Area School District Special Education Department to accept a comprehensive supports grant through Patton for up to $50,000. No questions or objections. I'd like that placed on Wednesday's agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
And that's all I have. Mr. Lake.
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Sangston.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. D'Amico, you have that?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all, Mr. Panzel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martucci. Moving to student services, Mrs. Sangster.
Thank you. Request approval to utilize Top Dog Therapy volunteer services as needed. No questions or objections, I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed. Question?
What schools are they going to be used for, or is that going to be used for just when we need them for?
So right now, our hope is the 4 elementary buildings, and then, depending on availability and success and logistics, we could expand into other buildings, but right now, the 4 elementary buildings is our plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. No other questions or objections? We'll have that placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following additions for the 22-23 Collinsville High School musical production staff for 4 performances. Not to exceed the budget of $50,000, condition upon obtaining necessary performance licensing, and to authorize such persons to serve in an uncompensated volunteer capacity until such necessary performance licensing is obtained. On the ability to hold, proceed, and conduct extracurricular activities under state orders. such agreement and appointments to be subject to earlier termination based on subsequent state orders. Stipends shall be prorated based on work performed. The following names were to be determined on October 26, 22 voting meeting. It's all for the musicians. Questions or objections, I'd like to have placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to amend the stage lighting supplemental contract for co-stage lighting with the original salary to be shared evenly for the 22-23 school year. Any questions or objections? I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following supplemental contract for 22-23 school year, contingent upon a receipt of a signed contract no later than 1 month after insurance, including the posting if the contingency is not met. Of the both two co-stage lighting. Any questions or objections? I would like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following travel. I'd like 1 through 28 as presented. Any questions or objections? I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have. Mr. Harshman?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Mongiel?
Nothing,
Mr. D'Amico, do you have anything to add?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Langston. Moving to technology, Mr. Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. I have nothing at this time. Mr. Martucci? Mr. Martray? Mr. Ghost? We have nothing, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harshman. Moving to transportation, Mr. Kokenar.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. 22A, request approval of the following updates, additions to bus and driver list for the 2022-2023 school year. No questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have, Mr. Panzella. Mr. Lee? Mr. Renzi? Mr. Evans? That's all we have, Mr. Panzella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kokenar. Under the President's report, request approval to nominate someone to stand for election appointment to the Intermediate Unit 1 Board of Directors beginning July 1st, 2023. There's no questions or objections. We'll have that added for Wednesday. And next thing is to discuss moving the February board meeting location next month. I think we had talked about maybe Monday being able to do the 121, and then the CTC for Wednesday for the board meeting. Does that work with everybody? Does that seem okay? Okay, no questions or objections. Do we even need to add that, or we just discussed it and we're good? Can you advertise it? Okay, thank you. Anything for public comment or non-agenda items? Assistant to the superintendent?
I have nothing.
Thank you. Dr. Brad?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.